time to turn the page in the chapter of life here and move away from the gym and fitness scene into more of the ranching bison aspect that he just kind of always dreamt of. It was almost more of like a retirement type thing that he was looking, or the fun stage of life, right? And little did he know what he was signing up for at that point, that that was just the beginning of a pretty wild ride for the last almost 30 years now.
Wow. So he was in like the fitness industry before he transitioned into farming?
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was my, both my mom and my dad were in the fitness. My mom was more on the nutritional side. She graduated with a degree in dietetics and moved into the health aspect from a dietary standpoint. And my dad was really passionate about those things, of course, because he was trying to perform at a pretty high level, compete at a pretty high level against national level athletes in powerlifting. So that was kind of his scene. Owned a few gyms at the time and was training and competing himself, and then also coaching and training other athletes simultaneously, and then moved on to more coaching and judging a lot of the bodybuilding aspect and professional athletes. Then once he kind of quit, hung up the competition side himself. So, and then from there, that was kind of the phasing into bison. But what's really interesting, I think, that kind of comes full circle, because a lot of people are like, how in the heck did you get into bison? Because it doesn't make sense, to go from a gym to a ranch. But really, I think it makes perfect sense, because ultimately what was the light bulb moment for them, what took bison ranching from a retirement hobby, if you will, to a full-fledged business like Northstar is today, was the light bulb of the nutritional element that bison are, and what everything that all the college years and all the training and all the fitness and just living in that space for so long, they were very attuned to what the body needed and what was missing in the marketplace. And bison just fit both of those like a glove. And it was better than chicken, but it ate like chicken, if that makes sense from a dietary standpoint. So it was red meat chicken essentially that everybody was missing, because red meat in those times was considered bad. It had negative connotations. So that was a lot of the trans fats negativity era, and blaming a lot of things on fat as the reason why us as Americans were getting fatter as a society. And
This podcast episode is brought to you by Signature Touch. Signature Touch is veteran owned and operated, and it was started by my wife and myself with a mission to provide the highest quality all natural skincare products made from ethically sourced ingredients. We have body butters, lip balms, and deodorants, and the best part is you could use it on yourself, and they're safe for everyone in the family, including your children. My wife's favorite body butter is Bernilla. It's made with bergamot and vanilla botanical extract. People say it smells like key lime pie. My favorite is Lavensense. It's made with lavender essential oil and frankincense. It makes your skin feel so nourished, but it's also good on bug bites and rashes. Check us out today. The website is oursignaturetouch.com. Use code JLA to receive 10% off your first purchase. The website, it's oursignaturetouch.com.
so
That's amazing.
anyway,
No,
it's kind of the journey, I guess.
no, that's cool. So
Yes.
your family had no history prior to that in farming or agriculture. So they kind of just took the plunge and learned it all while doing it, I guess. It sounds like, huh?
They did. Yeah, they did. And actually, both of them, my dad grew up on just a traditional small dairy farm here in Wisconsin. What he didn't like was the price taking mentality, that he was basically had one buyer, and that buyer dictated his life. He wasn't an adult, or he was an adult. He was going to school, and through high school, his dad was pretty non-existent on the farm. And so he took the shoulder the burden of a lot of chores before school and after school, and trying to fit in sports and academics in the mix there. But saw that basically he was he loved the work, but was there was no future in setting his own prices and getting, having basically being a small business owner. You had all the responsibility of the farm, but no opportunity to maximize your efforts. And so that was what turned him off from that aspect. And my mom came from kind of the same background, but confinement hog operations in southern Minnesota is what she grew up on. And so they're both very familiar with agriculture. They were gone from agriculture when they left home. They said, no, this is not for us. We're moving on, bigger and better things in life. And they didn't want to, they didn't have any intention of going back to either of those lifestyles, I guess. But it wasn't so much the farming or the agriculture lifestyle that had left a bad taste in their mouth. It was the way things were done essentially economically, and also some of the raising aspects just didn't sit right with them. So they did have agriculture backgrounds, but and swore that they would never go back. But this is entirely different from that. But they were gone. One of my dad's mentors in the early years of getting into bison told him, forget everything you know. And my dad said, well, good. It's been just long enough that I pretty much have. So, because it's so different, the way that we raise animals now, and the way that they grew up, and the way that's more the traditional, conventional agricultural methods when it comes to livestock it's night and day different. The paradigm shift is really drastic, and a lot of people who have grown up in agriculture have the hardest time transitioning over to like a regenerative type model because it's so different. It's just completely opposite of everything that gets pounded into you, by big ag. So
Yeah. That's got to be an awesome life growing up on the ranch, though, right? For you? I mean, I can
yeah,
imagine waking up with bison, kind of this fairy tale lifestyle. But I almost kind of think like for me, like when I was growing up working with my dad had his own business and I freaking hated. He did HVAC work. And
okay.
looking back at that, I was like, man, I should have stayed in that shit. I should have took over the business, but
Yeah.
hindsight's 2020, right? So was it kind of the same for you? Did you like get to a point where you kind of despise living on the ranch, messing with the animals on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say that I ever. When I turned 18, we bought our first processing plant. And so then I moved into that element because if you look around the family, we're a family business. Looked around the family, and my sister was super passionate about the animal side, as I was too. But I kind of had some of my skill set, I guess, is a little bit more in the customer facing aspect. My mom was heavily in the marketing side and sales side, and so I just moved into basically just needed a job. Graduated high school and said, well, here we go, and started at 7.40 an hour, I think, doing cleanup at the processing facility, and it was very much a dirty job, but it was kind of what I knew, and it was a good opportunity for me to get into the workforce, if you will. But I didn't really have a trajectory. I just knew that I enjoyed a lot of the aspects of the business, and I could see my connection, I guess, what really motivates even me today. I still love, my heart is on the land with the animals. But really the marketing aspect gets me so excited because I know what people need. I know what it does for me. I know a lot of people, everybody needs product like this. And so to be able to bring that message to them and represent what is going on the land, and then recognize that every consumer that is purchasing product just further supports what is going on in the land. And there's the only way that can happen is if people buy the product. And so that's what really fuels me and makes me really excited is the ability to serve people with a product that is unlike most anything else on the planet, but then it affects, the land and the animals exponentially beyond me going out and hauling a few bales out to feed some animals. That's almost more selfish work for me that I would enjoy that kind of work. So I still love that aspect. And then I moved, like I said, I moved into the processing side of things early on, and have worked all aspects of the business, and much more on the sales and marketing side now, kind of leading the charge here. So, but yeah, to go back to your initial question, about 5 years ago, I guess my wife and I, up and moved to New Mexico, and weren't really sure that this is what I wanted to do. I love hunting. I love the West. I love all the aspects of, bison ranching and living on the land and wild places. But the family business aspect takes a toll for sure. That is undoubted. But yeah, you don't really know. I think growing up and taking a lot of things for granted, in those moments that you don't see from the inside as readily. And so moving away, and I was still full-time working remotely in the business. And it didn't take me but a month or two, of being out of pocket, if you will, or not right on site, that I was like, man, I do truly love that. That is my passion, essentially. And so, yeah, through that time though, I was still flying back home and doing all the meetings, and still very much involved in growing the brand, and reaching more consumers. But yeah, I definitely had those feelings. I think it's healthy to go through that season too, to really give yourself a gut check, kind of cut the ties essentially, and say you do have the opportunity to do whatever you want in life. And then what you choose, make sure that you love it.
Yeah.
And whether that is the family business or not, I think there's a lot that is taken for granted though in those growing up years in an HVAC business or whatever, that you just see the, what do you want to say, the stuff that isn't pleasant or exciting or beautiful or very sexy about,
Yeah.
running your own business. It's a grind. There's a lot of stuff that's not glamorous that as the owner you have to do. But there's, in our line of work, we're just passionate about the ultimate goal. And so you kind of take your lumps along the way and recognize that it's not all perfect, but, at the end of the day, you're really proud of what you do when you lay your head down on the pillow at night. So.
Yeah. At Northstar, has it always been everything is handled in house? Because you said y'all have y'all's own processing facility. Has it always been that way, and y'all always kind of manage it, everything from beginning to end?
Yeah. So we purchased, like I said, when I turned 18 in 2005, we purchased our first facility and owned it outright. But prior to that, ever since we harvested our first animal, we were heavily involved in the process. We didn't own the animal, but I look back, or I think back, and now owning a processing facility and doing some customs harvesting and cutting for local farmers and things like that. That's one of the services we offer to our local community, is to be able to harvest and cut and package and present a really beautiful product, I guess, to their consumers. But growing up, we spent a lot of time. We were heavily involved in harvest on the slaughter floor, of harvesting all the different organs and skinning and right down to it. If we got a big order, we'd come in and help on the cutting floor and do what it took, to be able to get that product out the door in a way that we were really proud of it. So, but like I say, on the owning side now, if we had a farmer that showed up that said, hey, I want to be, I'm going to stand on the slaughter floor and I'm going to help you skin, and I want to harvest this organ and that organ, and then I'm going to come back on Tuesday and I'm going to help you grind or cut some steaks or do, like, that blows my mind. But that's what we did. And growing up, I spent a lot of time on. So by the time, I guess we had 8 years experience before we even bought our first processing facility, because we were so heavily involved. So I would say, yes, we did. We have been from the start, from the jump, it was all in. And that was just out of a desire and a passion, I think, for serving the customer and getting them what they thought they were buying from everybody else that we could see being in the facility that weren't, that wasn't standard practice. What our expectations were and what our customers were communicating to us. So to turn around and take that message into the processing side of things, we had to take things into our own hands essentially, and make it happen. So with that standard, though, you can't subject yourself to anyone else.
Yeah.
And so that's what ultimately my dad didn't have a dream whatsoever of owning a processing facility, but it's become a necessary part of serving our consumer and maintaining the integrity of how the animal is raised. You can lose a lot of value through the processing aspect if it's not well managed and cared for all through that process as well. So yeah, we're pretty passionate about it now and consider ourselves professionals in that realm. Also, it's been a rough learning curve, and it's not an easy industry to be in because there's just meat in general is just, people assume that it just shows up in a can or something. I don't know. There's just this disconnect, that
Yeah.
it's just like it's produced or manufactured or something like that. And so the art of meat crafting is dying. And so it's hard to find people that are really passionate about cutting meat because it's just like this lost thought or lost art, so that's a challenging aspect, but yeah, we're all in on all aspects, to make sure that what we provide to the consumer is everything that we want to be consuming ourselves.
How did y'all fare during COVID since y'all had y'all's own processing facility? Did that impact y'all whatsoever?
It did. Yeah. So COVID was crazy. So we were living in northern New Mexico at the time. Like I said, when I was living and working remote, and literally the orders just COVID hit, like whatever it was. We were actually out, and my wife and I and our kids were out in around the Grand Canyon in Arizona. I think Flagstaff. We were at a hotel out there, and it was the weirdest thing. It was basically right COVID hit, like when we were leaving the house. And by the time we got to our hotel, everything was a ghost town, and it was just like this weird alternate reality that you're living in. Like there was no room service, there was nobody in the hotel, like parking lots are empty, like there's nobody on the roads. It's like this apocalypse experience. But the orders just went, people were texting and calling me like, hey, the printer's burning up, like it's getting crazy. And by the end of it, we were only there for 3 days, but when we were driving home from Flagstaff to our home in northern New Mexico, it became pretty obvious that we were getting overwhelmed. And so I literally that night I packed my bags and drove straight through 18 hours home to Wisconsin to start, packing orders and help. So it was all hands on deck. Everybody shows up in that kind of a way to pull it off. But yeah, thank the Lord that we weren't at the mercy of another facility or a shipping warehouse, or, that we own the process and we could just decide whether or not we were going to ante up to the challenge, And so we grew like 400%, our online sales, I should say. And our business was quite different at that time, but we went from a 60% wholesale to 40% online business to 85% online and 15% wholesale in a matter of 4 weeks. We grew like 400% on online sales.
Wow.
And it was a crazy ride because it stressed every single aspect of our business to grow that quickly. But we stayed in stock better than almost anybody else on the internet. We ramped up our harvest and we're hiring people as quickly as we could. And shoot, we had friends in here, just like, hey, can you help us for an afternoon, just to hold the phones down a little bit. And it was wild. But there's a lot of people, that were just kind of sitting at home and, they were on work leave. The whole world was just kind of a big question mark at that point. But we knew one thing, that we had orders coming in the door and people waiting for food, and a lot of people that couldn't access food because grocery stores were empty. So it was almost this emergency response type situation. But yeah, thank the Lord that we had all the resources at our fingertips that we did to be able to answer the call, I guess.
Yeah.
But that was crazy. That was really crazy.
And how has the following been since then? Like I guess people just Googled like order like how do I get food to my house, right? I guess
Yeah,
that's how
right,
it
right.
organically happened. Like I'm
Yeah,
I'm blessed.
meat delivery or food delivery. Yeah,
Yeah. I guess I'm blessed in that my family has their own land and we get our own food that way. So I never
yeah.
experienced that, but I know it had to be scary for people going to the grocery store and seeing the
Hmm.
shelves completely empty. I can't
Yeah,
imagine what that feels like.
yeah. Me neither. but it was, but it was at the same time. So I mean, I love to hunt, and and we always have ample amounts of meat, in the freezer from what I've hunted. And I honestly eat. I guess I eat frequently what we, our products. But for the most part, I love to hunt. So I like to make all the things, that I hunt into our products essentially. And I just enjoy that aspect also. But yeah, for a lot of customers that were calling and sharing with us, their firsthand experience of what they were going through, it was really eye opening that we had drifted so far as a culture from connectivity to where things come from.
Yeah.
And it was quite obvious in that time, in that season, that it was a real problem. And the pendulum needed to swing back the other direction to get the consumers closer to the source. That we couldn't have so many layers and so many risky aspects of our food chain that were bound to break, or if they did fail, what happens? And the collapse of a food chain is a scary thought to a lot of people. It's very sobering, and so it forced a lot of people to change their paradigm on how they and reevaluate, how they develop their their relationship with their food and where they get things and finding sources. And it overhauled our food system in a really powerful way. We haven't since we were expecting, sales forecasting and all this stuff was just kind of completely went out the window. But we said, okay, so what if we could salvage, I think it was 30% of the growth or 40% at the end of the day, if everything shakes out and 2 years later, if we've retained 30 to 40% of that business, um, we'll be really happy. And we ended up, because all along, honestly, our focus has been so much of 5-star experiences for every consumer, whether it's the packaging and the expectations of on-time delivery and just every element, every detail that comes into the whole experience, making sure everything arrives frozen every time, except for the 0.5% of the time, but managing all of that stuff to the nth degree so that the consumer experience is just that we don't want one-time customers, right? We want lifetime customers, and what that takes to earn lifetime customers is what we're focused on, so that if someone hears about us through someone else or does happen to Google us and find us and stumbles on and places an order that they don't want to look anywhere else. They've found the jackpot. And so focusing on that aspect rather than going out and getting every consumer in the market, just blasting all of our product everywhere and spending huge amounts on marketing to get a whole bunch of one-time customers. That's not been our approach. I guess it's been the reverse. But so what happened when things just exploded and consumers were exposed to our product that otherwise wouldn't necessarily be, because people were shopping for meat in stock. They
Mm.
weren't looking for 100% grass-fed, regenerative, this and this and this, but it exposed them once that product was delivered to their door and they cooked it in their pan. They're like, wow, this is different. Like the experience of it is so we had 78 or 79% of what we experienced in COVID stuck. And
Wow.
we, in that business, that became our new floor. And we thought we were going to lose ground in 2022, I guess, in terms of growth. Um, and it didn't. We are actually up 14 or 17% still, over 2020, 2021. And this year is still growing over that. So I think it's just a testament to the difference of quality of product and the eating experience of regeneratively raised meat. It speaks for itself, right?
Yeah.
We always say the body doesn't lie. And once you experience it and you feel it, people say, I just feel different. And there's a lot of science behind that. There's phytochemicals in product that is raised the way that we raise animals, that is scientifically proven that there's more energy, right, through phytochemicals in the product that we sell on a 4-to-1 ratio, and versus a feedlot or a CAFO style product. And so it's not placebo or anything like that. It's real. Everybody thought it was kind of placebo for a long time, just because it makes sense that you would, if you have a clear conscience about what you're eating, of course you're going to feel good about it, right? But that's a feelings based. But to actually have it be biological response, that you have more energy after you eat this type of meat. There was just a meat study done that came out this spring that was able to pinpoint that phytochemical difference that indicates the reason why people say that they feel energized, after consuming the 100% grass-fed, regeneratively raised type meats. So interesting stuff.
Yeah, I'm reading a book right now by David Montgomery. It's called What Your Food Ate, and
Oh,
he talks about the phytochemicals on regenerative beef. But he also mentioned
oh
something
yeah.
about bison very briefly, and I'm thinking that you can expand on it. But he was saying that bison is one of the most nutrient dense meat out there, compared to, like, if you compare a bison that's regeneratively raised versus a cow, I think there's like a double or triple the amount of nutrients in the bison.
Yeah. Yep. There was a study that was done. So interestingly enough, like, bison is culturally um, the most significant animal to North America, essentially, right? It's the most iconic. And people, that come from all over the world and living just outside of Yellowstone for a few years, like, the amount of international traffic for people to come see bison is mind blowing, right? Most people don't, fly international to come see deer or elk or bears, though those are cool animals, but it's the bison. Everybody wants to see a bison. But as well renowned as they are globally, from a nutritional standpoint, there's almost zero information to this point. There's almost been zero. Um, they're relatively unstudied, I guess,
Mm.
nutritionally, until there was just a recent study done that was over this past year, that actually one of our partner ranches participated in, on the 100% grass fed regenerative product that's literally came off of our ranches, or supply ranches, I should say, not NSB acres in particular, but the product that's going into our packaging, and comparing that against some grain finished bison, and trying to see what the differences are, and really say, is there a difference, and if there is, what are they? Out of that study, that ended up being the most extensive meat study ever. It's more even more extensive than any beef study that's been done to date, and it was the top 1,500 nutrients found in bison meat is what they studied. 1,500. But that's only 1,500 out of over 40,000 different nutrients found in bison meat.
Wow.
That's unbelievable. I'm not exactly sure what beef is. I do know that the Dr. Ben Bleet, the one who did the study out of Utah State, said that bison is the most nutrient dense protein on the planet that he has found, and he's pretty world renowned in studying high level athletes and taking tissue samples out of humans and seeing what makes them exceptional versus other humans, and trying to correlate. Okay, so if they eat a certain thing, like, scientifically, if they eat the most nutrient dense foods on the planet, what does that do to them? Eat, or if you are what you eat, essentially, to what degree is that truth scientifically? And so he's dug into this a lot, and he said, he doesn't think that there's another more nutrient dense protein or food on the planet than 100% grass fed, regeneratively raised bison. And so it's pretty crazy, the fatty acid profile comparison that he did to grass fed beef. Even all along, we thought it was slightly better than grass fed beef, and there's a 4-to-1 ratio on omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acid profile. So omega-3s are the positive, and omega-6s. You just want it to be basically a 1-to-1 balance is perfect, right? So like salmon, actually pastured pork that's raised regeneratively, like on an as nature intended diet, is almost a 1-to-1 ratio.
Oh, I didn't know
Their
pork
fat,
was.
yeah. So
Oh.
pork always gets demonized, but it's the way it's raised that's the problem. And then grass-fed lamb also. So those three are kind of like the pinnacle of omega-3, omega-6 fatty acid profile. Most consumed and bison was always like, oh, it's somewhere, somewhere just back from that, around that grass-fed beef probably, but it's more nutrient dense and it's typically leaner, so it's healthier. It was all hypothetical, So now this study is essentially proved, but what they found in the study was bison, 100% grass-fed and finished bison compared to like raised beef. The bison was 1.7, 1.5 to 1.7. There was a little bit of a range to 1, which is exceptional. I mean, that's 3 times better than grass-fed beef. So that's just the fatty acid profile differences. So bison are, yeah, they're unmatched. I mean, I don't, everything we thought we knew or it seemed like, again, from anecdotal evidence or experience, seemed to point to the fact that they were superior. And now this study was just like a big billboard that said it's significantly different. So it's pretty cool to see that come out. And now they're doing a phase 2 on that study to answer questions that came out of the first study. That's always how science works, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty cool.
What's the total count of bison? How are the numbers looking?
Yeah, there's around 400,000 in the world right now. So that's substantial, especially coming back from the late 1800s where there was less than 1,000 at the lowest point where they were nearly extinct. So then conservation, basically the bison is the impetus for conservation around the world. But it started here, and it started with bison. It started here in North America, I should say, and it started with bison. It's kind of the test species, or the species that they were trying to save and conserve, and not just throw a few in a zoo. Although that's kind of where it started, right? Is just grab a few and actually one of the main conservationists, William T. Hornaday, was a taxidermist for the Smithsonian Museum, and he was like, "Well, these things are dying off fast, and they're going to be extinct shortly. So I better go out and shoot a few and put them in the museum. That way, people for generations to come can see what an actual bison looked like, because they're gone essentially." And but they ended up capturing a few and put a few in the Bronx Zoo. But then there was a few of these wild herds, that were found. A few in Canada, one in Alaska, one in Arizona. Yellowstone was a little pocket, northern New Mexico on the Bermejo Park Ranch. There was a little pocket of bison that were found that were 100% wild. Caprock Canyon State Park in Texas was another one. But there's just a few pockets, of little isolated herds that hadn't been completely hunted out, that were in really, really rugged, disconnected country. So they're essentially on an island. But yeah, that was all that was left. And they captured a lot of these animals and again put them in a zoo, or they put them on ranches, and they started breeding them to try to save these animals. And that's, I think, the difference and what makes me so passionate about what we do at Northstar, and in the meat space, is people need to recognize, like, things that just get put in a glass case and set on a shelf. They just pedal along, and there's a lot of conservation efforts. This bird watching mentality, as I call it, and there's nothing against bird watching. I love all sorts of species and love bird watching, but we can't just sit back and enjoy from afar. We have to be active, and we have to be engaged in the future of these species, right? And so the way that the purpose of bison is to be consumed, right? That's their main purpose. And while they're living on the planet, they do incredible things for landscapes. They regenerate landscapes faster and better than any other plains animal or any other large animal on the planet. and just from their herding instincts and the way that they interact and the way that they move and the way it's just really fascinating. But that creates a really nutrient dense product, which ultimately feeds predators, which are humans and grizzlies and wolves and all sorts of things, that run around on the planet that need to eat. And
Yeah.
so we as humans get to benefit from incredibly nourishing meat. But if we don't eat these animals, then they become set on a glass case. And there's only about 30,000 bison in public ownership
Mm.
between state parks, national parks, and wild herds that are just roaming outside of fences. 370,000 have been the result of ranching efforts to try to grow and really propagate these animals. They're living on a lot of really, really rugged natural landscapes where bison always were and should be. But the encroachment of a plow and cattle, basically, those are the things that will kill bison faster than anything in modern times. And ultimately, that's almost what killed them back then, was the encroachment of settlement. And today, what settlement looks like is plowing and beef cattle.
Mm.
And so long as beef cattle are worth more than bison, they'll always have the upper hand, essentially.
Do you,
And beef cattle will slowly, continue to squeeze out and outcompete bison for the range.
is it?
So as bison have, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you: is it easier to raise beef cattle than bison? Like, are we? Do
Yeah,
you like? What are the reasons why? And do you think we'll ever make a shift back to bison?
I hope. I don't like being pessimistic ever, but it's a hard knowing or seeing the way that our country is in modern times, I guess, with development and fencing, and just infrastructure in general, which creates just a lot of barriers for free roaming animals and the ability for animals. Now the West is huge, and there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of acres for bison to roam. But beef cattle are easy. They're relatively dumb. They're easy to handle. Bison are not dumb. They're extremely frustrating to handle. Sometimes they're dangerous.
Mm.
They're a wild animal. They have instincts intact that are dangerous to be around. But those same instincts are what keep them alive and well, and allow them to live and thrive on their own. When bison are thriving, beef are dying, or I guess I should say it the other way around, that when beef are dying, through inclement weather, blizzards and storms and all sorts of drought or whatever, beef just essentially just stand around and die. They just don't, there's no instinct to survive or will to survive really left
Mm.
in beef cattle, unfortunately. And so they're extremely vulnerable. I don't see them as a sustainable resource, essentially. If we were to pull all the fences and pull all management, bison would thrive, and beef would just eventually, there'd be some wild beef cattle that would survive, essentially. But by and large, they would all pass away. So anyway, from a management standpoint, you see bison as being superior. They're just a lot more challenging, and people just have the tendency to just want easier, right? And so that's not bison. They're better, but they're definitely not easier. They take a lot more infrastructure. They take more planning, but the reward should be higher. It is higher in different regards right now, but um, the there's probably, as far as bison ranching goes versus beef ranching, you're probably going to make the same amount of money with beef as you are with bison right now. And,
Wow.
and if beef are easier, that's what people are going to go for. That's what a lot of people know too. And so it's a default. It's what grandpa raised and what dad raised, and so we got to stay beef cattle ranch. And you watch the movie Yellowstone, and you see some of that played out in that or that series, I guess, not the movie, but the show. You see some of the war, the West, and how heated that stuff gets. And it's a war. I mean, there's still bison are at the center of that cultural fight still, and unfortunately they get caught in the crosshairs and it just about wiped them off the planet.
Mm. Can you paint a picture for someone who's never heard of Northstar or who's thinking about ordering what
Mm-hmm.
you it sounds like you collaborate with a number of different farms and ranches to
Mm-hmm.
uh, to package the product. Does it all go through the same processing facility? Like, where do the chickens come from? Because you offer elk, you offer cow, you offer a
Yeah.
wide range of different animal products on the website. So
Yep.
how does it all
Yeah.
come together?
Uh, 29 years of networking
Yeah.
relationships. It's we have a lot of really, really special supply relationships, and they come slow. I would say one thing that's most frustrating about ordering from Northstar is our ability to keep things stocked.
Mm.
A lot of people voice frustration about, oh, it's always sold out, or gosh, as soon as it comes in, it's sold out. We will never cut a corner, and we will always do what is right. We'll never go buy some animals at a sale barn to harvest them and keep things in stock. What we have, what we raise, and this is a 3 to 5 year process of onboarding a new supplier and getting their land transitioned over to meet our standards and our criteria for what we want to produce, and also that the animals are a really good eating experience, that they have um, a really good life. And there's just a lot of different aspects to even regenerative or grass fed people or ranchers minded people in that space. We have they have to level up again, even to be to meet the quality and criteria that we expect of ourselves, and that we would produce a really well fattened, finished, high quality eating experience product, not just something that meets the. We say there's two different types of grass fed: grass finished and grass starved. We're never going to be on the grass starved, right? There's grass fed by default because they didn't want to feed him anything else, and so they just kind of like, well, go find what you can, and it might be tin cans and cardboard out there, and that's
Yeah.
kind of what they're eating on. And you see that, unfortunately, and that's what creates a bad experience with a lot of people that say, most people that say, oh, grass fed is terrible. It's because that's the grass fed by default, or the grass starved, or organic. People say, oh, this is 100% organic. Well, it was organic by neglect almost, that they
Yeah.
didn't want to treat their animals well. Meanwhile, they have parasites and they're just emaciated, and that's not what we want. That's not what we're a part of. But so I guess, yeah, we have a lot of supply relationships, and we're intimately involved with them on weekly basis. We're constantly, visiting and having meetings, and going and seeing their animals multiple times a year, and they're coming and delivering animals on site, and we process 100% of everything that in order to get a Northstar label, it has to meet our raising criteria. There's a signed affidavit on um, on file with the down in Madison at the Capitol with the Department of Ag and Consumer Trade and Consumer Protection. So it's legally binding agreement that we sign ourselves to say we're holding up to these standards, and so that's one element that's legally binding for us and all of our suppliers. We're basically swearing to oath that this is what we're doing, but then we also verify, trust get verify. So we're always on site, and we have an open gate policy for any of our acres that we say, well, what is the ultimate standard that we would want to reach? Is there a third party certification that would earn consumer trust? Well, we want consumer trust, so we're going to invite consumers out and basically be an open book, and that will earn their trust essentially. And anybody that's listening to this is more than welcome to come out and enjoy a ranch day or a ranch tour and see exactly what we do and hear about it and see the animals. But yeah, that's our supply relationships are near and dear to our hearts. They don't come easy, and they're highly verified. But everything that gets a Northstar label, like I said, comes through our facilities, that we would harvest them ourselves, that we would cut and package them ourselves, and then we do all of our own shipping as well. And so when you call and place an order, or you have a tracking issue or anything like that, we 100% take care of it. You just give us a call, shoot us an email, message us on Instagram, whatever it takes, and just reach out, and we'll get you taken care of.
Dude, that's a lot to manage. So do y'all,
Mm-hmm.
if someone I guess, is there an application process? Like someone applies to become part of the network and then you have to go verify like how they're running their operation?
Yeah. So basically, the way that our network grows is word of mouth,
Yeah.
almost like our customer base for the most part. We don't advertise that, hey, we're looking for new suppliers. We're not voicing that necessarily. We just have we're focusing on the relationships that we have, and then this person knows that person and say, hey, I think they fit the mold. They're like me. They're another one of us, quote unquote. They're kind of crazy. So we would invite them in and say, hey, let's have a meeting. And so we invite them in and say, this is the honest truth. It's not easy. Are you willing to sign up for this? And these are the requirements. This is what we're going to do. It could be a really fun ride, but you got to be passionate about it. Otherwise you'll fall off
Yeah.
quick. And so again, you're just constantly swimming upstream, blazing new trails. And that really, really invigorates some people, and other people, it burns them out. So finding the right people is always, just like employees, just like customers. You got to find people who find say things that matter to people who care. And so finding people who care, we feel we have a lot to say that matters, but not everybody cares about it, whether it's a perspective or, there's a lot of life events that happen to people, farmers, and also, they'll have an experience. It might be on an old family farm or in a corporate job, and they have a life event that brings them to their knees health wise, and they have to start looking into this and unpack their own health. And they say, wow, I'm really passionate. I see the value of this product now, and I want to be a part of the production of and feeding other people well in this way with whatever species that I'm passionate about. And so, yeah, we have on a lot of our farms too, there's multi-species symbiosis going on where, the chickens and the turkeys and the pigs and the beef are all complementing grass-fed lamb, and they're all complementing each other by grazing rotations and things like that. So it's pretty cool that way as well. But yeah, there's not a real formula to it. It's just kind of organic growth. And again, like I said, it takes 3 to 5 years before, when the conversation starts to the point where we harvest our first animal, that's about the time period. So it's a long, slow, arduous process to walk out. And a lot of times that tests people's commitment, right out the gate. They say, ooh, financially, I can't wait that long or whatever. And so there's a lot of financial cost to it as well, and pressure that you have to be really committed,
Hmm.
or you won't make it.
There's a lot of certifications. You talked about the organic certification, and I just talked to a winery that they just got certified in. I don't even remember what it is. It's like the regenerative organic certification.
Okay.
How much weight do y'all put in certifications in general? Do y'all try to obtain any, or um, like what y'all's thoughts on it?
We The only certification that we pursue doggedly is our inspection service of the safety and the quality of the food, because there's a whole food safety element to this that we're managing very tightly as well, and we want to excel at that as well as anybody, and be providing the safest food on the planet as well from a food safety standpoint. Outside of that, everything is watered down. The standard that we hold ourselves to, any certification that I've ever come across at this point, that we have ever, my mom and dad included, because I was only 8 when we started this thing, so obviously I didn't have too much knowledge of what I have today, or oversight. So anything that we've ever come across to this point has been a dumbing down. I'm not sure. There's always new ones popping up, and it's really, really, really difficult. The best things are always so nuanced that you can't hardly put them in a box,
Mm.
right? How do you document and say never or always? Anytime you use those two words, you're sacrificing somewhere and boxing yourself in, and leaving yourself options that aren't always in the best interest of the consumer or the animal or the land. And so that's where I really, really hesitate to get too excited about a certification, because by default, certifications are, and policies, right? They don't encourage autonomy. They don't encourage problem solving. They just tell you exactly what you do, when you need to do it, and how and how it should be done. And who can predict that? Who can preempt COVID? Who can preempt and predict situations that haven't really been experienced yet? So you're constantly chasing your tail, trying to come up with new policies for new experiences, and it's kind of silly. It's a little bit of a wasted energy or effort, in my opinion. And I would say this too, as far as there's red flags, as far as what consumers can look at. There's critical mass points that you cannot cross in the food system. And I'm going to say that there's a national chain carrying a certain product, it's probably too big to be truly authentic to the degree that you are likely looking for. That's what we're passionate about, I guess, even down to our field harvest. You can't scale the way that we harvest animals respectfully, and we're way too small to be able to supply a national chain grocery store with product. And to conceivably get there and still maintain the integrity of what we produce and how we produce it, it's almost impossible to think about managing to that scale all the intricacies and details of every single process and every single step. Now, there's an awesome quote that I heard. I think it was the founder of either North Face or Patagonia, that said, he had a sign above his desk that said, "No detail is too small." And he had crossed off two. And so basically it just said, "No detail is small." And I think that is so true, right? There's no details are small, right? Especially when it comes to human relationships and human interaction with our food. Like, everything matters substantially. And so to have this mindset of, or when you're looking at your food and seeing where you're sourcing it from, if there's enough volume going through a certain pipeline to be able to supply a national type grocery store, it's not what you're looking for. That should be a red flag.
Yeah.
From a critical mass standpoint. But also when it comes to certifications, if it's got a certain popular certified bug, there's probably compromises somewhere along the way that they're having to make that aren't necessarily in the best interest of that product and the consumer.
Yeah. What was interesting, I don't remember exactly what I asked him, but it was somewhere along the lines of, like, regenerative organic. I thought that they would come and test their soil and be out in the field and really like looking at stuff. And he said that they don't come and look at their fields. They look at their paperwork is what they look at.
Yeah.
So, and I'm kind of a pessimist, half the glass is half empty kind of guy anyway. And I'm like, oh, so it's a money grab is what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Somebody's looking for that seal that basically people can put their trust in and say, okay, I'll give you money. It's in a producer's mind, it's their fast track to consumer trust.
Yeah.
And that doesn't come quickly. People have to be exposed to a certain certification for a long period of time to be able to earn the consumer trust so that they can trust it on your packaging. Trust is not earned overnight. And anytime you try to cut those corners, it costs a lot of money and it's rarely effective.
Yeah.
And a money grab is the perfect example. And I feel sorry for, a lot of those people that are investing in those types of things, because it's a bit of a scam.
Yeah.
It's sad to see.
You ever seen Tommy Boy?
Oh yeah.
That just reminded me of that of that scene. He was like, well, I could put a label, I forget what he says, that part about a butcher's ass or something.
Yeah.
That's a funny part.
Yeah.
Man.
Something about a T-bone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Get a good look at T-bone. Yeah.
I forget. Yeah. I'm going to have to go look it up now.
Yeah.
You talked about the field harvest. Can you paint a picture of that? Because that seems
Mm,
like every time you talked about it, you can tell it's something special to you and how y'all manage that. So can you talk about like what a field harvest looks like?
yeah. It's the best hunt ever. Like if you could script, I'm a hunter. If you could script the best hunt, as far as the way that you came upon that animal, or the way that you found that animal, and the way that you were able to take that animal's life, um, it's the most humane you could possibly write it up, right? So we just harvested a bunch of elk this last week, and they were so chill that nearly every single animal that we had harvested was laying down chewing its cud. And so it's basically a military grade sniper rifle, precision rifle that we have built with a suppressor on it, high power optics, and it's built for putting bullet holes inside of bullet holes, or bullets inside of bullet holes, and so we can sit back at a distance and select the animals that are ready for harvest and hit essentially the size of a dime every single time to hit the brain stem or the brain itself. Um, and it's instant, instant lights out for that animal. It's the most peaceful way you can possibly harvest an animal. I mean, we had an animal welfare auditor come out and do an audit on us, and her remark at the end of the day, and she was very professional the whole entire time, making notes, and just spent the whole entire day and watched several harvests. And at the end, she just basically summarized, and she said, "I cannot imagine a more peaceful way to go."
Mm.
And I don't even think she was necessarily even referencing to the animals that were like, well, if I guess, if you got to do that, this is probably the least of the worst, or the best of the worst, or whatever you want to say. But just in general, the animals are literally living their best life out in the wide open pastures that we have right around our processing facility. Sits right in the middle of a farm, of an 80-acre farm, and so we have pastures out there that these animals are grazing through just like they would any other day of their life. And so they get drive out there with a tractor, and like I said, sit from a distance and harvest those animals, and quiet, and it's pretty amazing. So it's yeah, the animals are raised up until that point as if they were essentially wild, on their wild native habitat and diet, and they get harvested in a way that's, like I said, the best hunt ever.
No.
And it's pretty cool.
Is that something
It's
that
a
you
it's a
do with your local community? Like, do you bring people out and do it with them and show them how to
um,
clean and skin and all that stuff?
we sure should. I know we have a lot of to this point we're Midwestern folks, and we don't necessarily we take a lot of pride in what we do, but we don't see ourselves as special or anything like that. And we focus so much on the consumer as doing it well, and we need to be better about inviting them in so that they can experience it themselves, and not just us doing it and them serving exclusively. That's something we're really passionate about. But yeah, we could. There's an aspect we haven't to this point, offered workshops or field days or anything like that to be able to watch a harvest and invite people in for you know, basically a class on how because yeah, there's so much interesting aspects once you start skinning, and there's so much methodology. Yesterday was our harvest day, and I was training a new employee, and I said, this all looks like madness, but there's a meaning to everything, everything, every single step, and the reason why you do things in a certain way, in a certain order, and harvesting glands and organs and all these things, and essentially a really food safe way that separates the yuck from the
Yeah.
from the stuff that's all edible, and keeping that extremely clean and almost sanitary, it's almost like I envision it almost like a hospital environment where it's not nearly that clean, because there's blood and there's dirt from the hides and all this kind of stuff, from the animals just being out out in the wild, but to be able to separate those in a very methodical way, to make sure that everything's clean and sanitary, and it's really cool. It's really cool to be able to know see the anatomy of the animal, and all the bounty that it gives, like all the different aspects, the organ, that you pull out, and knowing the nutrient density, and the nuances of that particular organ versus the one that's almost literally right next to it.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to see and experience.
That whole process is very emotional. I was just thinking about, I took my stepdaughter hunting for the first time. She grew up in Ohio, and
Okay.
she's never been hunting before. So I took her, I think she
Okay.
was 13 or 14 at the time. First time really holding a gun, doing the whole thing. And
Mm-hmm.
watching her skin the deer was very emotional for me. And I don't know if it was as emotional for her, but
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in this. I've seen it my entire life. So you almost not really take it for granted, but it's just something that you're used to. But when you
Mm-hmm.
see someone that's never experienced that in their life, and they're working
Mm-hmm.
through this, and it's like maybe it's because as a child and now I'm watching her do this. It's very emotional,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very
Yeah.
spiritual, and it's like it almost takes you back to this primal instinct that you have, that we all have in us.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. You're hitting the heartstring there. Um, yeah, I would say, like, it's hard to describe, right?
Yeah.
What those emotions are, like you're saying. Like, I don't quite understand what was going on, but it was very emotional and spiritual. And I think in that process of harvesting an animal's life, like recognizing, being fully conscious and fully aware of what you're doing, that we're not avoiding any truths to what we're doing here, um, but doing it in a way that's so respectful, is in honoring an animal's life to the degree and the regard that we have, and basically bringing dignity to this animal that's going to be food for a lot of people and nourish a lot of people. That's a really, really, really powerful thing. I don't know that there's an earthly experience that is as profound as taking the transformation of taking the life of an animal and taking that responsibility and shouldering that burden, essentially, and then maintaining the respect and kind of shouldering that responsibility, like I said, from taking their life and then fully utilizing their carcass, all the parts and pieces that come from that animal, in a way that justifies their being, right? So I always say, like, an animal, basically, how an animal dies justifies its being, its living, almost, in when it comes to meat terms. So we take that animal disrespectfully and we throw half the carcass away. We waste, half of what it has to offer. That's a disrespectful. We just disrespected its entire life, because that was the culmination. That was the pinnacle of its. That was the bloom of the flower, if you will. If we pluck a few petals off and throw it on the table and let it wilt,
Mm.
that's extremely disrespectful. And our job is to pluck that animal in its full bloom and maintain the beauty through the entire process, so that the end consumer gets to benefit from it in the full bounty of what it was intended for, right? And that ultimately respects the animal's life, from the very beginning. And so I think that's a really cool process. I'm passionate about. I guess a lot of the reason that we moved out west, too, was for me to focus a little bit more on guiding hunts. I love to guide elk hunts in particular. That's like my favorite, but all species. But when you take an animal and walking up on that animal for the first time, not having shot, basically just having been the guide through that process, and a client comes along, you get to show them an experience in you through your eyes, right, and get to see things differently. And there's a lot of people that have hunted, even that don't necessarily see things the same way that I see things, and so to be able to show them, or bring them through that process and that journey, in a way that's different than what they've experienced before. There's a lot of guys that do get emotional. They're like, man, it's different, to not just see that animal as a thing or an object, that it was living, and it's food, and it's like to be respected, and to have a little moment of respect, when you first approach that animal. And that's the same things that we're doing through through Northstar too. With every animal, there's a lot of weight of a lot of responsibility that we carry, and every time there's a sense of sadness, when you harvest an animal's life, but where it's going, and you could be proud of what you've done, to this point, and further down the chain, to be able to bring a lot of respect and dignity to that animal's life in the process.
Yeah. It, I think you explained it perfectly by saying, like, I'm not good at putting that whole process into words. I'm not very eloquently. I just can't do it. I've talked to a couple of vegans on the podcast, and
Yeah.
not have debates or anything, but just talked about our lifestyles. And I said those words that I'm honoring the animal after I take its life, and I show respect to it. And they challenged me on that, and it's hard to explain, like, this animal that I took its life from is going to be feeding my family, is going to be feeding my soul. It's providing nourishment to my entire family, and I'm in control of this whole process, and I'm in tune with Mother Nature, I guess, versus someone's who's whatever diet you're on. It doesn't have to be a diet debate, but people are
Mm-hmm.
so removed from that process of harvesting their animal and getting the food for their family. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's a wild thing how separated we are nowadays.
Yeah, I think it's a reflection of, and I mean, people can hate me for saying this. Some people will hate me for saying this, but I think it's, if you can expand your mind, or be open to the thought process of, it's an indication, I guess, of ignorance, because veganism, almost everyone that's vegan is not vegan for nutritional benefit, right? They're trying to equal up to or replace, say, basically, I don't have to eat meat, and I can basically replace those nutrients in different ways through plant-based alternatives. That's not entirely true. On a nutritional panel, you can, but those are not necessarily all bioavailable. Your body can't utilize those. Even from a nutritional standpoint, no one is vegan because it's better nutritionally. That's not really an argument. Where I have a lot of respect for people that are vegan is being convicted about a certain way of life, or a certain ideal, or level of respect that they have for other life, and altering their own lifestyle um, to to respect those convictions that they have, and doing something about it. I have a huge amount of respect for that. I don't have any desire to participate in factory farming and factory slaughter, and kind of this huge machine that just sees animals as canned goods, essentially. That's not anything that I want to be a part of either. Though going vegan isn't the that's not the answer, because so nutritionally, there's no basis to stand on to say that vegan is better. If you look at so let's back up, I guess, and look at the landscape. What's best for the land, the animals, and the people, right? That's what we say. It's a triple bottom line. Has to be a win for consumers and people who are living on the land. It has to be a win for the animals that are living on the land. It has to be a win for the land itself. You remove animals from the equation, and you just have people and land. Land suffers and people suffer. Land is invigorated when there are animals interacting with that land to ignite. Basically, they're the, what do you want to say? They're the refresh button, I should say, or the reset button, I should say, on that land, reinvigorating itself. I don't know how to say it in really layman's terms, but restarting the plant life and the soil life, and in a way that actually builds soil and doesn't just maintain, but it actually adds soil, and it adds to the life underground, it adds to the life above ground, and it's just this beautiful process. So those are animals are essential to that process that cannot be replaced through mechanical invigoration. It's not nearly the same. There's the way that animals interact with the land, the way that they stimulate the soil, the way that they urinate and defecate and trample and graze, and what they do is irreplicable by human intervention. So animals are necessary. A vegan diet is in direct conflict with animals being on landscapes. Every farmer that is trying to raise a crop and get a crop to market sees animals as inferior. They're eating dollars out of their pocket. And so they are not welcome here. Essentially, if I'm running a vegan farm, I don't want to see animals out there because they're eating profits and they're introducing, crop damage and introducing a lot of things that I don't want. I want my farm as sterile as possible with water and sunlight, and that's it. That's not a system that I can be excited about supporting, because that land is ultimately being degraded by, or being supported by hauling in non-native nutrients. Essentially, you're hauling in, you're mining the earth to be able to replace what you're shipping out in produce. That's a degrading that cannot possibly be regenerative without animals on the land, right? So in a system as Northstar operates, the land is benefiting massively because we want animals out there, right? We want the land to produce more, to be able to feed more animals in ways that is deeply nourishing to the animals, which ultimately feeds humans in a more deeply nourishing way. And if we're harvesting them in a really respectful and dignified manner, and then carrying that all through the process, that's the linchpin, I think, that leads the door, or opens the door to now talking about, so if we're going to eat animals, how are we going to do this? Because the land is robbed of an essential piece of the puzzle, essential piece of the pie, that is not welcome in a vegan production environment. So I'm passionate about that concept, or that discussion, because it's I respect the people that uphold those beliefs, but it's a sign of ignorance, in my opinion. And it's not any fault of their own. I'm not singling anyone out, but I would invite anyone out to let's go take a look at Northstar and see what's going on there and experience it yourself. And then let's go, on the other side of the county and see what's going on in a cornfield or a soybean field or a pea field or a canola field or whatever crop you're looking at, that you want to talk about, or a kale field or a lettuce field. I mean, anything. I mean, it's monocrop, it's monoculture. There's no diversity. There's no life welcome outside of what you're trying to produce out of the soil, which is ultimately degraded soil that's only getting worse. So anyway, it's a broken system, but ultimately it's a consequence of our industrializing animal agriculture, which is, and we've done it to ourselves, and it's something that we're passionate about doing differently.
Yeah, you touched on, I guess the last thing I wanted to hit on is that Northstar, you don't waste anything. You offer all the organ meat and, a wide range of it. Are people becoming more receptive to eating organ meat or organs?
Absolutely. I think everybody has a desire to, especially now, there's so much hype around organs. I mean, Liver King's fairly controversial, but he's a guy that's put things on the map. Dr. Saladino has done a great job of educating people, the masses essentially, on the value of organs. And it's been known for quite a while by a lot of the professional athletes and people who really understand human performance and what creates uh, the most vibrant human being, the most exceptional performance, human being. I think that's what's really interesting. I'm super passionate about lifting and human performance, from that standpoint, not only just mentally, but physically. Like what are those things that make you better? And what are those things that don't? And just understanding a lot of that kind of stuff. But organs are superfood, like the definition of superfood, and people recognizing that and really coming around that and celebrating that and getting excited about it. The tripping point still for almost anyone is the palatability. They don't taste like candy, although I think our I think it also takes it's a paradigm shift for people to recognize, like, once your body recognizes, like, this is good food, this is what it tastes like. I think it's different. You can recognize, your body can be trained to, they taste very different than almost anything else, but nutritionally they're different than almost anything else on the planet as well. So I think naturally the flavor is going to be different. But if your body knows that that's what good tastes like, it's interesting how your body starts to adapt and start to crave that. And once that flavor, bursts in your mouth, you're like, ooh, that's what I need. I know that because I connect it to how my body feels after I've eaten it. So that biological response, I think we've broken that in as a culture because we just haven't eaten it, and our bodies don't really even recognize it almost. So, but over time, I definitely see where it becomes a lot more palatable to me. But in one way that we've really became intentional about getting organs out to the public in ways that is more consumable has been through our ground blends and incorporating organs in with muscle meat in a way that anybody that eats enjoys a burger, or a ground meat, something of some sort. And so it's the easiest way to incorporate it into tacos and spaghetti and chili and a hamburger or whatever you're going to consume that uses ground meat. You can just substitute with a ground blend and get a little bit of organ in every meal, or a few meals a week. Doesn't have to be every meal, but yeah, we have that's been we're really passionate about developing those lines and going even further with that. But we believe also that nature is not lacking anywhere, right? That everything we need as consumers exists in nature. And when you start understanding how nature thrives and the yield of the land being the animals that are consuming really nutrient dense, massively diverse forages and things that are not really palatable to humans, but they upcycle and they harvest all those nutrients and gets condensed into their muscle meat, and then we consume the muscle and we get all the highly palatable benefits of those and organs. So then we take that and then we create blends and things, and once you start looking at the different nutrient profile that's found in organs, a lot of what we're supplementing on the expensive, supplement side of pill popping and things like that gets replaced just through diet. And so through convenience and affordability of blends versus, a supplementation type diet, that's we're excited about being able to kind of change the tide on where people put their money, that they can put it into their food and get all the bioavailable nutrients out of their food rather than a handful of capsules in the morning. So that can be done through the various organs, that we're harvesting, and it's amazing.
Is there an organ that you recommend for first time triers to try first?
Liver is always the one that that gets the most hype, and for good reason. It's super powerful. It's very strong tasting. It's got that strong iron undertone. So we have different blends. I would say that's the way that I would encourage people to go if they're trying to get into incorporating organs into your diet. Go to a blend. We have a regular ground blend, which is kind of our OG blend, our very first blend that we made 10, 12 years ago with heart and liver. And that's a great one, heart, liver, and 75% trim. So it's a good amount of liver and heart, but not overpowering. And then one of our most recent ones that we came out with, that we just launched here this past summer, was our Old World blend, which has 7 different organs in it, but it's dialed back, so it's a smaller percentage. So it's actually more palatable, and you get heart, liver, kidney, spleen, pancreas, thymus, and adrenal, all in correlation to what the animal would yield. So we think there's a lot of intentionality behind the percentage or the ratio of that organ within the animal too, and what our bodies need. So
That was cool, man.
yeah, I would say, check out, if you're interested, just check out the website. We've got 11 different blends, ground types, just in bison alone. We have a lot of different species. So find the species, find the blend that you like. The way that we raise our animals, I'll say this too, the organs taste different. They're more mild, they're sweeter. They're not going to say that they taste like candy. But at the same time, they're much more mild and much more palatable than a grain finished, more acidic diet animal. It's not as strong and pungent, I guess, of a flavor in those organs, just because it's a more balanced pH, more of a neutral pH versus an acidic environment. So there's flavor profiling difference there too.
Well, Sean, I know you're a busy man, so I appreciate your time. I'll let you get back to work, man. How can people follow you
I appreciate it.
on social media, and what's the website?
Yeah, NorthstarBison.com. Find us there. We got a lot of good resources on there, as well as our web store. And then our Instagram handle is just at Northstar Bison. So that's kind of the 2 best places, that we're most active. But yeah, shoot us an email, give us a call. Message us on Instagram, whatever. You can just reach out. We're highly engaged
Awesome,
folks.
Man. Well, I appreciate your time, dude. And I'll let you know. I'll tag
Thank
y'all.
you.
I'll try not to spam y'all too much when this comes out. It'll be a couple weeks, but also, dude, we're still working on the documentary. We're planning. It'll probably be sometime next year when we make it up north. But we just did a couple more stops here in Texas, so we're done with our. Well, I say we're done. We're done with our interview portions in Texas. So we had like 4 or 5 stops. So we need to make our way out to California, out to your area, and some more spots up north. So that's the plan, dude.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited to hear more about that too, and what you got going on there. That's interesting. I think there's so much to be said and so much to be learned in this regenerative space. Like it's so fascinating, and there's so much that we're learning, and this is our profession. We spend all day and night, thinking and living and breathing this stuff, and it's just blowing our minds. And so there's so much out there for consumers to dive into and really learn about, and it's cool. So what you're doing is huge. I just say that, like, the more educational aspect that we can bring, and the more spotlight we can put on regenerative as a whole in this community that's growing and serving more people all the time, a growing consumer base, is awesome. I'm so excited to hear that you're doing this project, and it's going to be.
And thank you for connecting me with Dr. Van Vliet. How do you pronounce his name? Van Vliet?
Dr. Van Vliet.
Vliet.
Van Vliet. Yep.
Okay.
That's how I said it. Yeah.
I'm meeting with him
he's a Dutchman.
On next Thursday. So
awesome.
I appreciate it. Yeah. I've been reading his work.
That guy is a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, dude. I've been reading his work for like I say a long time, like the last 12 months, I guess, since I've started down this rabbit hole. And there's so much to learn, dude. Every time I uncover like a new rock, like I get overwhelmed with it sometimes. Like I don't,
Yeah.
the lack of knowledge that I have in it, in the space, but it's fun to continue learning about it though. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And even, yeah, even like I said, for us, that are professionals in this space, it gets overwhelming at times because it's so huge and
yeah.
so impactful. It's crazy,
Yeah.
crazy, crazy. It's exciting. It really is. And we're just scratching the tip of the iceberg, I feel like, too, on the knowledge of why. Why is nature designed the way that it is,
Yeah.
and why does it function the way that it does? And I think one thing that really blows my mind too, I'll say this, like I was just watching a documentary here this winter, like a BBC documentary or something like that, and it was talking about some global weather patterns and some of the stuff that they're learning, and so most of the Amazon is fertilized by windstorms in Africa. So
Mm.
all this particulate that gets stirred up in the desert gets basically sucked up into the clouds, travels all the way across the ocean, and then accumulates and falls out of the clouds in the Amazon, and that's where most of the fertilization comes from. And so if there's transcontinental fertilization going on, what's going on all these soil subsystems essentially,
Right.
that are going that are in the prairie, and the communication between even the Midwest and the West, and just our little continent here, the East Coast to the West Coast, and
Yeah.
what's going on in those ecosystems and how they're communicating and correlating to each other. And we see things as wasteland and put in a landfill. Meanwhile, that was those nutrients were feeding another vital ecosystem that seemed disconnected. That was, and so just the unintended consequences of things that we do on a daily basis,
Yeah.
and the decisions that we make, that we would make judgments on things that we feel are wasted or not fully utilized. And it's just amazing for me to think that, man, what if we just sat back and learned a little bit more about what's going on here and ask the question of why. I know it has a purpose, but I don't understand it yet. What can I do to learn about why this is the way that it is? And
Yeah.
anyway, it's crazy. It's
No,
crazy fun stuff.
no, it's that's why I continue to do this podcast, man. I just talked to this guy. I forget what group he's from, but it's the Pollinators of America or something like that. And he was talking
Oh yeah.
about how many different species of pollinators have been impacted through the use of neonicotinoids.
Okay.
And he was given some crazy facts, like a one square foot treated lawn can kill like 500,000 bees or something like that with these chemicals. And it's just like
Wow.
stuff that I keep learning about that just makes it kind of scary, but also it's
Mm-hmm.
fun to share the information from the experts like yourself. It's kind of become a passion. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, just firsthand experience here too, to go right along with that. We live on a lake right now, and the lake, we had a kind of a dry spring a little bit, and everybody's treating their lawns and doing all stuff all summer long for weeds and fertilizer and all this, and so then started raining like in the middle of July, and as soon as it rained, the lake went instantly green, and it was just
yeah,
essentially, it was just all this garbage that washed in off everybody's lawn
yeah,
and off all the cornfields. That was just kind of accumulated from 6 weeks of dry spell, and so it
yeah,
was just sitting there, and it rained and rinsed off and went in the water, and it just exploded, algae bloom, and I mean, you could see the bottom of the lake off the end of the dock. Like, I mean, it's 6-8 feet deep, and no problem. And literally the next, it was almost a day. I mean, it was just like overnight. Um,
mm.
Within 4 or 5 days, I guess, of that rain, you just walk down there, and it was just like, what happened to this lake? It's like sludge,
Yeah,
and that was just one little example here, and we don't have near the population that a lot of other places around the country that were just perched right on our water systems, and just all the garbage that runs off of lawns and farm fields that are treated with a lot of this stuff. We don't think about those impacts and what it's doing to, our water systems.
Yeah, he was saying golf courses, the communities around golf courses are is some of the most toxic. Like if there's bodies of water around those communities, those are often the most toxic bodies of water because of all the chemicals that get used on golf courses, which is wild.
Yeah. So, anyway. There needs to be a revolution because that stuff is suppressing nature. And I think one thing that's really exciting to me is how resilient our bodies are and how resilient nature is. And despite the oppression and despite all the mistakes that we make and how well it thrives and purifies and detoxes itself, whether it's our liver, our organs, that are detoxing. And it's really remarkable, I think, from that standpoint too, how resilient.
Well, Sean, I appreciate your time, man. I'm gonna check out the website, and then I'll let you know when this comes out. I'll shoot you the link through IG or email, and we'll stay in touch, man. I really want to make it out there and get some footage of y'all. So.
Yeah, we'd love to have you for sure.
All right, man. You have a good one, man. Have a good weekend.
Thanks.
All right,
you too.
Bye.
Thanks, man. See ya.